Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Chris, welcome to Consulting Leader. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Let's just get straight into it.
Yeah, let's go.
My pleasure, man. So what got you into consulting? You seated at both sides of the table, right? C-suite operator and now consultants. What pulled you into consulting? Because usually, I mean, from my experience at PwC, it's usually the other way around. You start as a consultant, you climb up the ladder, and then you get pulled into by, banks, corporates, whatever. So what made you do the shift?
Yeah. So I've been in the payments industry, which is our focus here, and my personal focus for pretty much my whole career, 25 years now. So I don't know much else about payments. I'm pretty useless in many other areas, but that's really where I focused on. So, the firm that I'm a partner at, Glenbrook, I've known for my whole career, have utilized Glenbrook's resources early in my career, all the way up through when I was a chief information officer, chief product officer, chief operating officer at a number of different organizations. So Glenbrook had played a really important part sort of in my education, my growth over the years. And I went, and I've actually been sort of this run with the firm since 2022, but I had an earlier stint in Glenbrook in my career. And I just thought it was a good opportunity for me to take a little break from sort of that big corporate kind of grind that a lot of us are familiar with. So I joined Glenbrook almost 10 years ago initially. Had a great time, but thought that maybe I had a little bit more left in me. Took a little bit of a break, went back into the industry for 5 or 6 years. And then, as I said, back in 2022, I came back to the firm as a partner. And that was a really difficult position or decision for me to leave Glenbrook. But I always said to myself, there were probably only 2 businesses that I worked for in my career that I would ever consider going back to, and Glenbrook was one of them. So I was lucky enough that I had the opportunity to be welcomed back into the firm, and sort of, here I am today. And I've really enjoyed the opportunity and working directly with customers. And that's what's really most exciting to me, is getting out there, hearing what's interesting in the industry, seeing the industry change, and most importantly, being able to get kind of a very, very broad view as to what's going on, and get a lot of very interesting work, rather than sort of being focused or kind of pigeonholed into just 1 or 2 areas that you might be forced into if you're working in a corporate environment. So it's a great area for me. I love consulting. I love what we do.
Already many things to unpack here. I love it, Chris. So I think to your first point around I know payments and nothing else, I think that's a bit the bane of our existence as consultants. Without sounding too dramatic, you're going to heavily specialize onto something, and you're going to be able to monetize this at a higher and higher price throughout your career, because that's the whole thing. Like, you're the expert onto this. So I think it's not that much of a bug. It's more of a feature of consulting. Glenbrook, we go back a little while with Glenbrook, because actually, for the OGs of the listeners of this podcast, the 3rd episode was with Yvette and George, who you know very well, Chris.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, Glenbrook definitely the place to be when it comes to consultants, payment consultants, and consultants, of course. So how, maybe a refresher for me and for the audience and people who might not know it, what problem do you solve exactly, Chris, at Glenbrook?
Yeah, so this industry of payments is really interesting, because it's an industry that touches everybody's life. So it doesn't matter whether you're actually embedded in the industry, kind of working for a pure payments company, or working in a bank that issues credit cards or processes payments, or you're just, your mother or your grandmother who uses a credit card every single day. Everybody has a payment story. Everybody is touched by payments in every single day. So when you think about sort of a very, very complex ecosystem that must exist to make this happen, going from your merchant to whoever provides their POS terminal, to who processes that transaction, to the bank who has issued the consumer's credit cards, and all sorts of different specialist providers in between, this creates a really, really difficult environment. So just, helping organizations understand how to navigate that environment, how to grow, how to expand, how to innovate is really core to what we do. But, nothing stands alone, of course. Nothing's done in a vacuum. The payments environment changes dramatically. We've all experienced this as consumers where, probably grew up and a lot of stuff that we were doing was with cash. And then we started using a lot of cards, credit and debit cards. And all of a sudden these days, very few of us are actually touching our plastic cards at all, right? We're using our phones or we're transacting online. So you see this, tremendous evolution that occurs in this industry. And there's a lot of challenges associated with that. But when we talk about how we help clients in the industry, I really like to break it down in three simple ways. Number one, we help them figure out how to do something new and how to do that in the right way. Number two, we help them learn how to take something that they're doing today and help make it better. And number three, which is a big component of what we do, is we help them manage their risk, because there is a huge aspect of risk to this industry, whether it be fraud risk or credit risk or sort of everything in between. And that's really what we focus on. The challenge in payments is there are many, many pain points and many, many different perspectives based on where you stand in that ecosystem. So that, of course, creates lots and lots of opportunities for us to come in there and to help folks out.
Love this. So I'm coming from a corporate treasury background when I was a consultant. So I'm very aware of all the risk and the issues that arise in the payment industry.
Yeah.
In your particular case, Chris, and really looking at the business of consulting here, because as you mentioned, right, the payment industry is very, very broad. It goes from the individual trying to, give money to their granddaughters to the big corporations making massive payments. Mm-hmm. So in your case at Glenbrook, who do you serve, and who's the decision maker that you need to get in front of in order to talk business?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, kind of in this industry, that sort of varies greatly. As a firm, maybe if I could start just with our clients, we've got some of the largest names in banking or the pure payments industry, retail and technology. And a lot of those companies are companies that you've never heard of, maybe as an everyday consumer, but are very big multi-billion-dollar companies. A lot of them are day-to-day sort of brands where you're stepping into their store or you're subscribed to their online services or you're purchasing something from them online. So it's a good variety of different customers. But, a lot of our customers, of course, we can't speak to, but a lot of them are public as well. We work closely with the largest card networks in the world, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, et cetera. We work even in areas like philanthropy and with large NGOs like the Gates Foundation, formerly the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, working at developing inclusive financial systems in developing parts of the world. So it's not necessarily just working with big commercial banks in first world countries. Sometimes we're in other parts of the world doing interesting things. I just got back from Africa myself about 10 days ago, doing a lot of work in this area. So it's a really, really good variety that we're dealing with. So the stakeholders, of course, then do vary. Sometimes we're working with people in an operational aspect that are really just trying to fix things or improve things. Sometimes we're working with folks from a strategic aspect, maybe product managers, chief strategy officers, things along those lines. And very often, we're in the C-suite as well. So, those individuals that are responsible for the larger vision for the company, trying to understand what the landscape looks like, or maybe helping them do something like understand their strategy for a merger or an acquisition or something along those lines. So we've got a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different type of companies that we deal with. And, some of these we've had for 20 plus years. We have sort of staying power with a lot of these companies, and we like to think that we're providing value to them over a long period of time.
Of this. The reason I love this is I'm going to be able to ask some deep, tricky questions, Chris.
Sure, yeah.
And by the way, guys, I have authorization. Chris told me that, I could give a go at him.
Throw it at me. Go ahead. That's right.
Exactly. So I think one of the biggest problems as consultants, right, is to get into the room with the right people, with the decision makers, all whilst keeping in the loop, right? The procurement team, the PR team, if there is some communication involved. Like, it's very hard to talk to the person who's gonna make the decision at the same time as talking to the person where you're gonna work with, potentially the one unlocking the funds. And you mentioned like big commercial banks, right? I've worked with those. They're big to stay corporate. So how do you approach developing new business when it comes to big commercial banks or big, Fortune 500? How do you get into the room with the right people as a consultant? And what I'm trying to get out of you, Chris, is what would you recommend consultants do when it comes to like, okay, I have a very specific expertise for a very specific problem, but my clients are Fortune 100 or like, top 10 banks in the world. How do you get into the room with the right people?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think one of the problems, if there's a problem statement here to be said, there's a couple things. I mean, there's just the obvious that you've stated, which is a lot of these organizations are very, very big and very, very challenging to navigate. That problem has always existed. We've, probably, going back to day one of business in trying to navigate large organizations. So kind of nothing new there. But I think the nuance here that's popped up over the course of now the last 6 or 7 years is the fact that we have become much more distributed, much less in person, right? People aren't still, even these days, are not going into the office every day. So, you don't necessarily have those opportunities to be face to face with your clients or your prospects. So, I remember back in the day, for example, when I was an executive at American Express and I had a physical office, at our headquarters in New York, the consulting leaders from the big firms would walk the floor. They would sometimes have desks in our building, as they were facilitating projects. They would take you to lunch. They would, include you in briefings and things along those lines. That type of sort of face-to-face intimate interaction, not that opportunity doesn't exist anymore, but the opportunity is much more limited than it has been historically. Even in our business, when we used to do a lot of more face-to-face training sessions, seminars, strategy sessions with folks, a lot of folks are mostly focused on doing that virtually, right? For obvious reasons. So, the whole landscape and the way that you interact with folks has changed significantly. So we've had to adapt to this, right? So, what we have really done is in scenarios where we can't really get us face to face, trying to increase our virtual footprint and increase our voice across lots of virtual channels. So, for example, we have a podcast ourselves, which is, fairly well listened to in the industry. It's called Payments on Fire. We like to think that it's probably the most well listened to podcast on payments that's out there today. And, we focus on bringing in big leaders and innovators and thought leaders from a lot of the big names in different companies. We publish books. It sounds like maybe something crazy these days, publishing physical books, but, we've got 2 books that we publish, one that many people refer to as sort of the payments Bible. And, we've sold 40 or 50,000 of these books over the years. We've got a new version coming out next year. We do a lot of thought leadership on LinkedIn, right? Trying to learn how to get our voice out there and to make ourselves sound a little bit more unique than some of the content that is, consistently regurgitated or regenerated, right? We take all that, we package it up, and, we sort of increase our profile, and it gets us a lot of speaking gigs. So, a lot of major conferences that are in the industry, or even private events and private customers for people in the industry and our clients. We're constantly speaking. I think I've done 6 or 7 speaking engagements just in the last 2 months alone. So, your hope on that is even with people that don't know you, that don't have history with you, get enough visibility to your thought leadership and your footprint to say, hey, listen, these guys sound pretty genuine. They sort of seem like they know what they're talking about. I should at least pick up the phone and talk to them. And maybe that gives them a little bit more confidence to take a chance with your firm. So, diversity, sort of new ways of reaching out to your client, I think is your client base is something that's really, really important these days.
Multiple things that I like about what you just said, Chris. So the first thing is, and I think people have a clear understanding of what I'm going to say based on 7 conferences in the last 2 months. I think B2B coaches and consultants underestimate the volume that is required to get certain results, especially in a world that is as noisy as it is
Yeah.
today. Like it actually takes volumes. And it's not like going to 1 or 2 conferences a year. It's going to 3 to 4 per month. It's going to Africa. It's actually doing the efforts of trying to move physically to where your clients is and your potential clients are. And it's exactly because of what you mentioned. Like the way we work has shifted. It's not like you get into that melting pot of a lot of people, a lot of potential clients, a lot of senior partners into firms.
Right.
We are much more working from home, 2 or 3 days max at the office, and volume is so important. And the other thing that you mentioned that I want to double down on is it's not just to reach new people. It's to have so much content out there that once you start building a relationship with someone, or you reach out to someone, or you start talking with someone, people do their research now. Anybody can claim anything on the internet. So
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
super important to be present, back to you, Chris, on LinkedIn, on a podcast format, to have some maybe deeper and like further detailed resources like books or ebooks to make it digital. And like having that content strategy that will not only reach new people, but also reassure the people looking into you and like, okay, I'm looking into Chris and clearly all he does is payment. He must know a thing or two about payment. Okay, I'm going to take the conversation further.
Yeah, you have to have a lot of irons in the fire, but at the same time, they need to be quality irons, right? It's just, there
Absolutely.
is a lot, as you said, there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of junk out there. And, I do see a lot of people who are very, very active and amplified on LinkedIn, but when you look at the quality of sort of the content that they're publishing, it's not really great quality. They've just learned to essentially how to optimize the algorithm and amplify their voice and their vision. So, it's not always about getting the most out there. It's about getting the right blend of different strategies and very good quality around the different ways that you're amplifying your voice. So we find that like really, really important is not just focusing on volume, but focusing on quality of our messaging.
How do you go from that, Chris? So crystal clear, I love it. How do you go from that to SOW, lettering of engagement? We are rock and rolling and we are getting started. What does the sales motion look like from, okay, I've heard about Glenbrook, I've looked into Chris, clearly they seem good, to guys, we're working together. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so what we're selling in our industry is not really a commodity. So it's very difficult from an engagement to have a cookie cutter approach to things. So as a result, that really does force us to put ourselves in a position where we really have to first understand the client's problem and their client's need before we start putting a proposal in front of them, right? So you need to stop with the cookie cutter proposals. The cookie cutter proposals often don't resonate necessarily with the unique needs of the client. So we really focus on putting a lot of legwork into even trying to hypothesize or really try to come up with early solutions for some of the client problems early in our consultation phase with the client, perhaps even before we put pen to paper on initial proposal. We sit down and we think about what the really deep kind of nuanced, relevant questions are that need to be answered in every single engagement, and try to be incredibly crisp with clients on what their expected outcome should be, or what they're looking for as an expected outcome as well. So, as we engage with our clients in sort of the informal and the formal courting process, if you will, and the formal proposal process, we really focus on trying to be specific about what value we're going to be bringing to them and what problems we're trying to solve. And the way that we get there, that I think is very important in our methodology, is we make them part of that process, right? It's not about sort of very, very rare for us to have a 30-minute conversation with someone and the next day we come back with a proposal, right? It's usually about having sort of an iterative approach, maybe coming back to them with an outline of what you heard, saying, do you think we're in the right direction on this? What would you like to see more of, less of? What problems are we not addressing here? And then ultimately getting to the point where you have something like really, really robust to put in front of them. So they have the confidence that you've actually heard them and you're actually going to solve the problem that they need to be solved.
Commodity, I think, is such an important point, and especially with all the tools coming up nowadays, I'm gonna have to say it. Sorry, guys, it is AI. You need to get away from the commodity aspect of your product
Oh,
and
yeah.
of your service, and really come with a premium, qualitative, based on experience approach, which costs more to the clients, but normally should bring more results as well, and which will allow you to differentiate and stay competitive.
Yeah.
So I don't get a lot of guests lately who already have one. So I'm gonna allow myself a quick question on this, Chris.
Sure.
How do you use the podcast at all in your sales motion? Like you mentioned, you need multiple touch points, multiple conversations. Do you send potential clients back to certain episodes that might be relevant for them? Do you invite them on the show to do certain things? Like how do you leverage the podcast in your like marketing and sales stack to move those relationships further, if at all?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think there's multiple layers to this, multiple approaches. So, first and foremost, obviously just the distribution of the podcast alone does bring in clients. And I hear this all the time. I just came back from Money 2020, which is kind of the largest finance, banking, payments conference in the world in Las Vegas last week. And, I met with probably 3 or 4 people that I had never met with before. And the conversation starts with, "Oh, I've listened to your podcast for years." We hear that a lot. So you just get folks that naturally pick up on the podcast. They build that confidence, around, or that thinking that I can be confident these guys know what they're talking about. So when we pick up the phone and talk to them. So just getting out there is number one. But then we could get a little bit more nuanced with it as well. So when somebody comes to us, particularly now since we've been doing this for many years and we have a kind of a deep library of podcasts, if it's relevant, we could say to them, "Oh, it's interesting. We've addressed this on our podcast before, and here's a really interesting perspective from a guy that was maybe the head of payments for J.P. Morgan or ran some fintech or something along those lines. Let me send you the link with that. Take a listen to it. Maybe it'll percolate some ideas in your head." And we use that sometimes even in the proposal process, where if we've done relevant things, we'll include that in our messaging to a prospect to say, "Hey, we've looked at this before. We've really considered kind of the more deeper, nuanced questions around this particular issue. Why don't you have a listen to it?" So, it's not just about a media outlet from a sort of marketing perspective. It is sometimes used as a client marketing, client acquisition tool as part of our, sales process, if you will.
I love that. One of the things that the partner back at me during my PwC days taught me was, here is how I'm gonna say how he was saying it. So like there are two types of consultants, the hunters and the farmers.
Yeah,
And he was
yeah,
like, Guillaume, I'm a hunter. Like I love the smell of fresh blood in the morning. I love to go after new business. And he was like, the best consultants, the one bringing in the most money to the firm, are the farmers, the ones able to take an initial engagement, over deliver on it, and then lay down these multi-layered, multi-year projects that's going to benefit other teams as well within PwC. Those are the ones that grow the fastest because this is where the money is. We've talked about marketing, sales. Talk to me about how you retain clients, how you convert an initial engagement into more engagements that obviously bring you money, but also deliver more value to the clients. How do you do that at Glenbrook?
Yeah. So I mean, let's state the obvious first that we don't need to get too deep into. At the end of the day, your quality of work needs to be good. That's first and foremost, right? So that's your foundation. And if you don't feel like that you have delivered 100%, you need to do whatever you need to do, whatever you can do to try to sort of recover the client's trust, to get them back up to the point where they think that they should be engaging with you again for a follow-on engagement and ongoing relationships. So all starts with quality of work there. I think that's kind of motherhood and apple pie. Everybody understands that. That's fine. But I think once you establish, a good track record of delivering good quality work, that leads to trust as well. We all know that relationship that buyers have with certain consultants, where they just know that if I have a problem, I could turn to this individual or this firm to help me get the job done. That's ultimately what you want to be, right? You want to be sort of that top of mind, trusted advisor, that subject matter expert that people feel like they could pick up the phone, like they have a friend in the industry that they could speak to in tough times when they need help. So the continued sort of establishment of trust, growth of trust, and growth of that relationship is absolutely critical, right, to remain top of mind for your clients. I'll throw something out there, though, that I think is also important is, you have to be very honest with your clients. And, you have to be honest with them sometimes about what you don't know or what you can't help them with. So, we see a lot of these big consulting firms that, take the position that they could always solve any type of problem, regardless of the industry, regardless of the type of problem that's thrown at them. But we know the reality of the situation is all firms, big or small, are much, much stronger in some areas and weak in other areas as well. And, we tend to be quite honest with our clients if somebody comes to us and it's not in our wheelhouse. We don't try to say, yeah, we can do it. And then back to my earlier comment about quality of work, typically that does not result in the best quality of work. So what we try to do in those situations is we try to help our clients out and find somebody that could help them, see if we could play a role there, maybe jointly with someone. Or in some cases, you just have to refer them out to someone else, right? So give them the confidence that, even if you can't solve the problem, you can help them find someone that can solve the problem. And that, again, helps just reinforce the trust principle and reinforces the principle that regardless of the type of problem, they're going to pick up the phone, they're going to give you a call.
So the reason I think why this is so important is, so first of all, stating the facts and saying the truth is important in general in life, but that further build your authority and credibility. You will be able to pull in other people who might be able to work with you and therefore pull you in on other client engagements. I think people also underestimate, like they tend to want to do everything.
Yeah.
But like being able to say to your clients, hey, look, I'm not able to do this. Here is a list of recommendations. By the way, for that, you might want to look into this. I cannot do that. But for this, and this item, I'm your guy. And like
Right.
the authority that this builds and the credibility in the sales itself often helps actually closing the deal, because like, okay, he's being honest about what he cannot do, and he's being honest about what he's gonna, pardon my French, kick ass at.
Yeah.
And that's how you want to roll.
Yeah, and I think as you mature, right, that forces you to think about kind of who your partner ecosystem is, who you look like. So, you wind up establishing trust with other experts in the industry that that you can rely on in those cases where you can't deliver directly to your clients, but you have the confidence that you have someone that you can really trust at any point to pick up the phone and help you bring the best quality work and the best value to the client. So that's an important part of this equation as well.
Clearly, Chris, you master your topic. You're good at your craft. I'm a bit curious. Like, where would you say in the consulting practice you feel challenged or stuck right now? The reason I'm asking this question is we will have people listening to us, and some of them might be like stuck at exactly the same point. I think the value of hearing from your peers that they are stuck at the same point and the way they think about it will actually unlock situations for certain people. So where do you feel stuck right now, and how are you thinking of solving it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, we've talked about a lot of these different strategies, like when we're talking about, sort of the multiple irons in the fire strategy, for example. That sounds all well and good when I talk about it, but we know that the execution of things like this is complex. And when you're looking at these things, particularly around sales and marketing, if you're an owner or a partner in a consulting firm, at the end of the day, you still need to deliver work for your clients, right? You still need to go out there and you need to acquire new business. So, I sympathize with anyone who feels like they're stuck or feels like that they're drowning with so many responsibilities in their business, whether they're just a single consulting practitioner or running a small firm or something a little larger, because these are a lot of different things you have to focus on. And there are a lot of different disciplines as well, right? Is I'm not a marketing person, I'm not a salesperson by training, but you kind of have to throw yourself into the fire, and you have to learn these sorts of things to be well-rounded and to be effective with some of these efforts. Now, of course, I'm not a single practitioner, so I've got some great colleagues that I work with, so I could rely on them a little, and I recognize not everybody's in that situation. But just dealing with the variety of different challenges that are thrown at you is a challenge to begin with, right? I think good consultants need to be able to, I'll use the term context switch pretty quickly, right? Because, I'm in situations where, I mentioned, I just got home, I've been on the road for 5 weeks, right? And the things I've been doing those 5 weeks have ranged from speaking at conferences. I've been leading workshops sort of on 4 different continents in the last 5 weeks. I've been doing client work at the same time. I've been writing proposals. I've been helping with our own podcast, sitting here talking to you as well. And, if you look at my schedule every day, it's not about, consulting work for client, one after another, right? It's a lot of context switching between a lot of different things. And
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of your listeners here that are kind of nodding their head saying, that's kind of what my schedule looks like as well. And I think that's challenging for all of us, right? So being able to manage that is really, really a big challenge, I think, sometimes. And, sometimes you just need to take a step back. I think what has helped me a lot this year, and it's come at the support of some of my business partners as well, is saying we either need to delay some efforts, or we sometimes just need to say no to things. Like if something is not really straight in our wheelhouse, like I talked about earlier, see where you could help the client and get somebody to help them, right? Or be honest with the client. Every client always wants something tomorrow. Be honest with them and set expectations early around when you can deliver, so you can manage these things effectively. That has helped us a lot, I think, this year, as we've been very, very busy this year. And those are some of the things that I would think about if you're in this similar situation as I am these days.
Yeah. Being able to switch almost personalities is a skill required in
That's a good way
consulting.
to put it. Yeah, sure.
Just to follow up on one of the things you mentioned, Chris, I think the ID versus the execution is, and that's true for consulting, but obviously that's true for any form of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
I think it's good to have great ideas and to have new ideas and to have thinking of new ways to do certain stuff. But what's going to matter at the end of the day always is how you execute on it, being able to focus right on the thing that you see yielding the best results and developing that, and then potentially, allocating 10-15% of your time to testing new stuff. But really focusing most of your time on what's actually working.
Yeah, agreed.
What's the business of consulting again, Chris? What's the biggest opportunity you see for you guys in the next 6 to 12 months?
So I think for us, what we're trying to do is we're trying to capitalize on change in this industry pretty early. We've got a lot of things going on in the industry that's being driven by innovation and just general change. And you may have heard about some things like agentic commerce, whether even you're a consumer, going on to a site like Walmart or something. Now you can get a bot or an agent to do shopping for you, or you could use ChatGPT from OpenAI to do some of these things. This has been a big revolution in the industry in regards to payments. So trying to handle, the questions around how this actually works from a payments perspective and a risk management perspective, which is also a big aspect of this, has been sort of top of mind for us. We're seeing changes in the way that money is kind of moving around the world. We've had the advent of kind of the next generation of cryptocurrencies, which are called stable coins. And stable coins are sort of redefining what could be possible from the movement of money across border. So those are just 2 examples of kind of big topics that are in our industry. But I think the key thing for us is to get in there early on some of these topics, establish ourselves as having a level of expertise really before anybody else, and then trying to adapt that to a story, a message, a value proposition for our customers. as to how we can help them think this through and how we could help them navigate this environment. There's a lot of gaps that are out there in organizations as these innovations continue to surface. Gaps around product functionality, gaps around risk management, gaps around understanding regulatory knowledge and the laws. Really just understanding the basics of these emerging technologies is sometimes even a problem, right? So helping our clients navigate that and understand that, getting in there early and being effective early, I think is a really, really important thing that we're going to be focusing on over the course of the next year.
Chris, Uriarte, I'm going to pronounce it in the French way. How do you pronounce the family name properly, Chris?
You would say in the in English you would say Uriarte, but maybe in some parts of France, maybe in Spain you say Uriarte or something like that. Spain, Uriarte.
Is that originated from Latin America?
That is actually Northern Spanish, Southern French. It's Basque. It's Basco.
Oh, Basque.
Yeah, it's Basque. That's what it is. Yeah.
Efaristo. That's not Efaristo. How do you say I love you in Basque? I learned it during my Erasmus for obvious reasons.
Terrible.
Matesaitut. That's how we say I love you. Chris, thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders. If people want to find out more about you and Glenbrook, where should they go?
Yeah, Glenbrook.com has all our resources, has our podcast, has all our thought leadership. Check out Glenbrook Partners on LinkedIn. And I'm Chris Uriarte on LinkedIn, and I'm always posting. So feel free to follow me and check me out.
We'll put all the links in the description. What is for sure is that you already earned a connection on LinkedIn. This is me. And thank you so much for coming on the show, Chris.
Thanks, Guillaume. It was a pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.
That was great.